Tyler Rotche, last name R-O-T-C-H-E. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on behalf of Prairie Rivers Network and our members in opposition to the current version of the proposed administrative rules to implement the Illinois Hydraulic Fracturing Regulatory Act, or Public Act 0980022. Prairie Rivers Network is the state affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation, a nonprofit organization that strives to protect the rivers, streams, lakes, and groundwater of Illinois, and to promote the lasting health and beauty of watershed communities. Much of our work focuses on how environmental policies are implemented and enforced in Illinois in order to protect our environmental and ultimately our health. IDNR's proposed rules are weaker than the regulations passed in June and are not protective of our clean and abundant water supplies. Prairie Rivers Network shares these comments as the basis for our opposition to the current draft of the rules. First, stronger protections are needed against water pollution. This includes full disclosure of all chemicals used, not just those that are considered to be indicators. This is important for adjacent well water users who may need to identify and track contamination, and it is also important for medical professionals and first responders who must be able to access chemical information on a 24/7 basis if an accident occurs. Second, no long-term storage of fracking wastewater. Tanks should be appropriately sized to allow for sufficient storage for both flowback and produced water. Wastewater should be removed within 7 days of placement rather than 7 days after fracking operations are complete, as stated in the law. Third, rules must include a requirement that all high-volume fracturing operations be subject to the law. For example, operations engage in high-volume hydraulic fracturing and were established prior to the Regulatory Act should not be exempt from the following law and implemented rules. These protections were made into the law in order to protect our drinking water supply, our shared resources, and our health, and no exemptions are merited. Fourth, ensure public participation.
Okay. I'm Erin, Carmen Sweeney. It's ERIN-CARMAN-SWEENEY. I'm from Makanda, Illinois. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My comment is about volatile organic compounds emissions, which I don't think have been mentioned enough, so that's why I wanted to speak about that. Although I'd like to say that I feel like this public hearing process has kind of been a facade of democracy this whole time, thinking that we're going to have some effect and some say in this, when really we know that the rules have been written by the industry and are being implemented by a government that's not listening to us. But I'd very much like you to listen. And I think I'll just start reading the comment. So even though Section 1 through 53 of the regulatory bill requires that fracking operations be conducted in a manner that will protect public health and safety and prevent pollution, and I think I should say here that it was brought up earlier that this fracking process exacerbates climate change, and we are beginning to, at a federal level, regulate carbon pollution, and that's not in any way included in this bill. And ought to be. We ought to be considering that as a public health and safety risk, because it is, and it's proven to be, and there shouldn't be any arguments surrounding that. So even though the bill requires that the operations be conducted in a manner that will protect the public health and safety and prevent pollution, there are currently no known provisions on how to reduce the highly toxic volatile organic compounds, or VOC emissions, that are generated by the fracking process.
Excuse me, sir. When you read it, it's hard for the reporter to keep up, okay? So don't read so fast.
All right. VOCs have scientifically been shown to cause asthma, cancer, and severe illnesses. These are definitely public health concerns. Also, I'd like to note that my father passed away of cancer only 4 years ago, and I'm sure that everyone in this room knows someone who has passed away of cancer, and we should be taking more care to prevent these volatile organic compounds from spreading around these frac sites and damaging the public health. Because if we were really invested in having a democracy, we wouldn't allow some people to go benefit from this drilling while the rest of us all suffer these consequences that kill us. So, in Colorado, oil and gas emissions are the main source of volatile organic compounds, and unsurprisingly, there have been many reported cases of illnesses from fracking pollution in Colorado since the boom began. These rules currently contain no best practice standards for mitigating these risks that could cause irreversible neurological or respiratory damage to children, adults, and other living things. Also, I should note that down where I live in the Shawnee National Forest, those other living things are really important, not just for their own sake, but also for our economy as a tourist economy. And if we're trying to provide jobs, we can't be taking jobs from one sector and passing them along to another. As of now, the rules allow companies to be wholly exempt from runaway natural gas and hydrocarbon fluids from production, section 245.900E, or flowback, section 245.845C. If the regulation of these isn't cost effective or it is economically unreasonable, and those terms are not properly defined in the bill anywhere. Defining those terms, basically, right now, you're allowing the industry to define them, and that's not sufficient. Ozone-forming air pollution measured in Colorado is up to twice the amount that government regulators have calculated should exist. And I just graduated with a degree in climate science, and ozone is really great up in the stratosphere where it protects you from UV rays, but down here at the lower troposphere, it's really toxic and terrible for people, and it's a terrible pollutant. So avoiding defining cost effectiveness or economically unreasonableness essentially allows companies to define these terms for themselves, and we can assume that companies will make sure that they define it to their own benefit. A cost-benefit analysis that only calculates private costs of companies while ignoring...
Slow down. Cost-effective analysis that calculates...
A cost-benefit analysis that only calculates private costs of companies while ignoring the social costs on the people and the environment will result in privatizing profits for big corporations while socializing losses for taxpayers, adding an unjust burden to the local and state governments.
Okay, we're out of time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Elmer, is it Fugman Jr.? Yeah. All right, Dominic.
All right, I'm Dominic Geology. Giafagleone. All right, hey y'all. This comment is about abandoned oil and gas wells serving as conduits to contaminate aquifers. In the proposed rules, section 245.210 at A6 and at A7, and 245.815 at B, and 245.1010 introduce arbitrary rules and grossly inadequate measures to protect against so-called frack hits when new fractures from fracking intersect with aging and abandoned wells.
Wait a minute, I can't understand.
Aging and abandoned wells. Okay. There we go. According to these sections, to be permitted in Illinois under the proposed rules, operators would have to worry about frack hits in existing wells that are within 750 feet of the proposed wells, measured by the minimum distance between any 2 points along respective boreholes. And even then, they only need to be considered, those existing wells, if they are drilled within 400 feet of the rock formation that the well should target. This regulation is obviously inadequate. Just this past September in New Mexico, fracking at one well blew fluids out of a neighboring wellhead half a mile away, 2,640 feet. Also, independent research shows that horizontally fractures can extend at least 2,500 feet from a bore well. In addition, expert testimony in Supreme Court cases has provided evidence that frack fluids have been found 3,000 feet from the well bore. Obviously, only requiring and plugging the old wells 750 feet away from the well bore is grossly inadequate, especially since abandoned oil wells are an obvious known source of aquifer contamination here in Illinois. Indeed, the residents of Hardinville, Crawford County, Illinois, have already known the cost of aquifer contamination from new fractures intersecting with old oil wells. Finally, the vertical distance of 400 feet is not adequate, since the connection with long-term vertical faults and fractures is a possibility. It only takes one instance to cause a long-term damage in an aquifer. And these are literally wellheads exploding with water and gunk. Revisions needed. Require the plugging of abandoned oil wells or gas wells up to 4,000 feet horizontally from any well bore, and regardless of how deep or shallow the old oil gas well is reported to be. Further investigations needed to be done to provide a means of locating abandoned oil and gas wells, which are not registered in the state of Illinois, owing to the decades-long history of oil drilling in these parts. And just lastly, $50 for a minimum fee. I have a $115 parking ticket. Sheesh.
All right, thank you, sir.
My name is Joyce, Joyce, Blumenshine, Blumenshine. I'm a volunteer with the Illinois Chapter Sierra Club. Thank you to IDNR staff and the hearing officer for listening to us tonight. The Hydraulic Fracturing Regulatory Act was really a regulatory floor, and in no way does it make high-volume hydraulic fracturing safe. This was a bipartisan vote through the legislature, very clearly establishing the regulations. Unfortunately, the rules developed to better define that act have not reflected the law that was passed, and we see this as a grievous error. Until the regulations are strengthened in numerous ways, this will not provide the minimum baseline protections that we must have in this state. And I don't mean it to sound trite when I say water is life, but water is life. And whether or not you see climate change and concerns for drought as major problems in the area where I live, I'm from Peoria, close friends of mine are in Fulton County, they worry about their surface water resources and groundwater, and we have to worry about that for future citizens. So I will just refer to a couple specifics within the proposed rules and how they don't agree with what the law was when it was passed by bipartisan efforts in the legislature. For instance, for public notice, the law says that there is required a public process for significant modifications. That means notices, public comment, and public hearings can be held. However, the proposed rules are greatly lacking. They very much narrow the types of modifications that require public process. In other words, it opens the doors for fracking permit holders to skirt public participation and for the IDNR to not hear from local citizens. As a person who volunteered for Sierra Club on mining permit issues, I can tell from my years of experience, this is a huge problem. When the public cannot get the notices for changes that impacts their property, their life, their health and safety, there is no way for them to protect their basic rights in the state. Another great concern is liability and burden of proof, and that's been briefly referred to before. The law says that it is presumed that water pollution found within 1,500 feet of a fracking operation was caused by the fracking. And in other words, the unique thing about the legislation was the industry, the frackers, have the burden of proof. It's on them. And it is assumed that they have caused the pollution. Unfortunately, in the proposed rules as they are currently, and which is totally unacceptable, the proposed rules it limits the presumption to a much smaller set of indicator chemicals. It's only about 100, not the over 300 chemicals that could be causing problems. So this is a grave deficit in the pollution rules as proposed. Another thing that's really critical is the emergency response and disclosure. In the law, it says that trade secret protected information about chemicals should be given to health workers when necessary to treat a patient in emergency and non-emergency situations. Currently, the rules are totally inadequate. They say IDNR has discretion. They should be contacted during business hours, no promise of immediate response. This is totally inadequate for the health and safety of citizens. We ask that these rules be sent back and revised to at least meet the minimum that the law says. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blumenshine.